Right here. So, welcome, Gaur Gopal Das.
Thank you.
Really, really appreciate that you actually took this time and made the effort to have this conversation with me. So truly humbled by that. Thank you so much.
It's a great honor, privilege, and pleasure to be with you and speak on this subject. So thank you for having me over.
Thank you. Thank you. And for the maybe true people that don't know you, I'm sure everybody knows who you are and has listened to you and learned a lot from you. But for the two that actually don't know about you, I just wanted to share a little thing. You were actually an engineer student.
Yeah.
And you actually were a bit of a rebel. You know, when I was listening to your story, you know, spirituality comes from that space, actually. A lot of people think that it's such a, you know, everybody's going to be open to it. Everybody's going to, you know, clap hands and allow their son or daughter to take this spiritual path. But I feel like all spiritual leaders have a tendency to be a rebel, you know, and go against the grain and truly, you know, face a lot of challenges. This is very good because I wanted people to know that, yes, everybody's appreciating you now, everybody's clapping for you now, but this is because they're seeing you towards this part of your journey. But they didn't actually see you going through this, going through the desire to become this person. When you had to challenge the ones you loved, when you had to go against the society, when you had to go against, you know, certain cultural expectations. And I wanted people to realize that even you had to go through that process, and it involves parenting, it involves family. So,
yes,
you know, this is, I wanted to talk a little bit about this before we got into the other stuff.
Sure. So you want me to say something about it? Okay.
Yes, I want you to talk about
sure.
how rebel you were.
Sure. Oh, yes. There's a very popular quote. People say that, you know, it takes endless nights of hard work to see an overnight success, you know. So of course I'm not calling myself a success. I'm just quoting somebody that when you see something, there's a lot of hard work, a lot of tolerance, a lot of persistence, a lot of investment that has gone in the journey. And that's when you start seeing some flowers blooming up in that journey. You know, when you see an iceberg, the tip of the iceberg is what we see, but there's a massive iceberg underneath the surface of the ocean, which is unseen to the human eye. So what people see is on top, you know, what you do in the world, how you're adored in the world, how you're admired in the world, or what are your success stories, quote unquote. But they're not able to see the massive iceberg underneath the surface of the water. So I think it's not just with me, but anybody who is wanting to do something tangible in the world, it is going to be a lot of investment in the journey, which is not often seen to the world outside, which ultimately then fructifies into something that we do and which is now visible to the world. So yes, it has been a journey. It has been a lot of hurtful experiences for the family in the beginning. You know, it definitely was. They're coming and kind of plodding and, you know, plodding and pleading that I go back. You know, I'm the only son. So I have a younger sister, but the only son. So obviously they wanted me to be with them. So it definitely needed a lot of persistence, understanding from their side. And now that the journey has kind of taken its turn the way it is now, they're very appreciative and they're really very supportive in the entire thing now. So it does take a while, and it does take a lot of persistence and, you know, patience for sure.
Yes. And do you feel like courage is a big part of that journey?
Yeah, I think so. When you take the path that's not walked that often by many, you have to take that leap of faith, that courage, you know, because it's not something that's very commonly done. When you choose a path which is not very commonly taken, it's not going to be as easy because you don't know what's coming next. You know, somebody wants to be an entrepreneur. It's a risky thing. If you want to take the regular path of taking a job or going into the mainstream career, well, that's kind of more secure. But if somebody is investing in a startup, he doesn't or she doesn't know what's coming up because there is a lot of odds there.
Yes.
So taking that analogy, you can imagine the odds in the kind of path that I've taken.
Yes.
You never know. I'll quit my mainstream Hewlett Packard job and started living as a monk. You don't know how it goes. You don't know what comes next. So definitely it does need courage. But I have always believed in one thing, that one has to be very true to oneself. You
Yes.
know, just because everybody else is doing something, you shouldn't be doing that if it's not you. And
Yes.
if one wants to be true to oneself, sometimes the path you take to be able to be true to oneself needs courage then, because it's a pathless walk. Not many have walked down that road. So yes, it did need courage. It did need, that leap that needed to be taken. And I just gave myself to it.
Absolutely. And I guess you would have never expected that belief system in yourself, that path that you took, would actually amount to you now having so many followers, you being on YouTube, you
Correct.
having, you being on Instagram. I mean, this is what people have to understand, that what we perceive, what our mind perceives, is so limited compared to
Yes,
what the universe can actually shower us with. But we
absolutely.
need to actually, start, and you say, with integrity and with truth. Because
Yes,
you actually walk that path, the blessings are way beyond what your mind can come up with. That's what I.
absolutely. 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 I think so.
So, in regards to this, when I became a mum when I was very young at 21, somehow I was able to understand the depth of what responsibility I was given.
Hmm.
And it was really weird, because for the first time I understood how much of an impact I had on someone else,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
And that actually made me try to better myself
Hmm. Hmm.
instead of trying to uh, control my child. I tried to improve myself. That
Yes.
was sort of what I, took away from it. And obviously, I have had a massive journey with that, and are constantly improving that thing.
Correct.
Now, how important do you think parenting is, especially in our culture in India? Because I
Hmm.
have noticed a huge difference in parenting coming
Hmm.
from the Australian, life that I've lived. I was born in India, went to Australia,
Hmm.
grew up there, come back to India. Now I've seen massive difference in parenting styles,
Hmm.
and how a family is sort of, grown and nurtured in two different places. And I've
Correct.
literally taken the bits, the positives, the good bits from here and good bits from there, and sort of created my
Yes.
own. Now, how much do you think parenting is important, especially in our culture in India?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite stories is this man who wanted to watch a football match, and his son was kind of creating a little bit of a ruckus here and there. So the man wanted focus. So what he did is he saw a newspaper which had the map of the world on it, and he tore it into pieces and gave it to his son like a jigsaw puzzle, and then put it all in place so he could focus on the match. The son did it in like a minute's time. And the man was absolutely amazed that, hey, this is like the world's map. And how did he put it together in a minute? He said, Dad, just on the opposite side of the picture of the map was the picture of a man. So I put the man together, and thus I put the world together, you
Oh,
know? Or in other words, you put a man or a lady, both genders to be
yes.
gender neutral, but a man or a lady together, and you put the world together, you know? So I think when we're talking about putting the world together and the impact on the world or an impact in this country culturally,
Hmm.
we are talking about putting individuals together. And when we are talking about putting individuals together, what does it mean to put a man or a lady together? You know, it means to facilitate their thinking, their thought processes, their value systems, their belief systems. Because if the thought process, if the values, if the beliefs are in place, automatically the outside world starts shaping up based on that.
Hmm.
Don't they say, watch your thoughts? They turn into words. Watch your words, they turn into actions. Watch your actions, they turn into a habit. Watch your habits, they turn into a character.
Yes.
Watch your character, it turns into a destiny. It all begins with a thought, right? So how important it is that we kind of align the thoughts, our values and beliefs to what they are meant to be, you know, and which is precisely why I feel that when does that journey begin? That
Mm,
journey begins in our childhood, correct? Uh, the earlier you start, the less conditioning there is.
yes.
When people, I'm sorry to use that one, but don't they say you can't teach old dogs new tricks?
I was going to come to this. I was actually going to come to this. Yes.
You know, so it's not as easy to train someone when one grows up. But imagine when a child grows up with the right thinking or values or beliefs, he or she is growing up in a very holistic way. There was a guy who went to a piano teacher and said, I want to learn piano. So he said, well, $100 a month. So he said, but I saw your other students, you're charging them $50 a month. Why are you charging me $100? He said, because others have come here as a fresh slate. You already have background to learning some piano by your own self. So the $50 is to undo the wrong that you have learned and now teach you afresh. You know, so a lot of times when people grow up with the wrong systems in them, there's a lot of hard work that needs to be done to uncondition them. So I very strongly feel that, you know, in this country, globally, and since you're asking particularly in this country, we definitely need to put parenting in place, the art of parenting in place. And culturally, yes, the art of parenting is different in different places. The principles are the same, but the way they are applied is based on the cultural settings. And if we see that any place is going a little off the mark, you know, in terms of what the principles are, we
Yes.
definitely need to work on it, create awareness, educate and train people in order to bring that back in alignment with what the principles of parenting are. But yes, if we have to invest in the future, we have to invest in our children. The
Yes.
greatest investment is children because they are the ones who are going to lead the future, right? So I do feel it is very crucial and important, that impact. Yeah, and you said your own experience, right? How you were impacted.
Absolutely. Now, when I think about this, when I sort of look at it within my life, within my neighbors, within my relatives, and you just sort of like you can broaden it. What I have noticed is that I can speak to the young mind, like you said, I can speak to
Yeah,
the young mind, but then they face resistance when they go against their parents.
correct.
The thing is, I want to express or I want to follow this path, but then I have a block. So now that you were saying about how with someone who has been conditioned for many years, so if it's our
Correct.
parents, it's our teachers, it could be our aunties, grandparents,
Yes.
how do we then go about raising a family that is conscious, that is authentic,
Yes.
having parents that are not as open? How do you tackle that side then?
Yes. Yes. So I don't think we can work only on one side of the story. One side of the story is the children.
Yes.
We can try and educate children, train children, make them more aware of how to live. But what about parents who are reserved to adopt that value system?
Yes, that's
You know, now in which case we have to work on both sides. And unless we work on, it's like otherwise it's like fitting a round peg in a square hole. You know, it's just an absolute misfit.
yes.
Correct. So it's an absolute misfit. So in order that our children be able to live by certain values, there has to be an ecosystem. And that ecosystem is the culture that parents adopt. So how do we get them to change? You know, how do we get them to realign? How do we get them to refresh their ideas of what parenting is? You know, I think it's not all that hard in the world today because they're seeing a massive divide in their relationships. You
Yes.
know, they're seeing that happen, that children are going farther away from the parents. They can see that there is a rift, there is a difference, there is a lack of bonding, there is a lack of deep connection. Correct. And no parent wants that because the bottom line is affection. The bottom line is love. The bottom line is concern for the kids. It's just that they haven't adapted themselves to how to do it in the setting today, So I think that that basic sincerity and genuineness is there in every parent, correct? And then the first-hand experience of the children kind of being disconnected a little bit is also there. So more than any other time, today, we find parents very open to learn and adapt to newer ways. Not, I wouldn't say newer ways. There's no newer way. There are always universal principles, but realign to the principles in a modern way, in a way that they can connect to their children. Now, in order to do that, I think we need to have online courses.
Yes.
We need to be very active on social media, and what you're doing is commendable, absolutely amazing that you're taking this initiative up, correct? And we need to form communities.
Yes.
Correct? That's very crucial. We need to form communities, because when we form communities and we make a model of successful parenting techniques, and we have people who have realigned themselves to these techniques, you will see other people also wanting to say, hey, this works, let me also try and see if I can connect to this community and adapt these principles to transform our family relationships with our kids.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes,
So
I am completely on that level. The what I want to talk to you about, and you would be a great person to actually discuss with, is that people actually mistake our old teachings or our old wisdom. And I find that a lot of the times when I talk about parenting, and I'm coming from a place where I completely believe in authentic parenting, okay? And so when I'm coming from that place, a lot of people will come at me by saying, no, but the elders are right. You should listen to what the elders have to say. And it's like me trying to explain to them that, age is not actually, something that proves that you're wiser than a 5-year-old. I've learned a lot from my son who's 5,
Sure.
And there's things I can challenge in an elder person, but it's like here to break through that boundary so that we can be open, so that, how do we open up that elder generation to honestly just be open to understanding that there are different ways, that we should all be learning in life. We should all be focusing on raising empowered families. We shouldn't have hierarchy in the house. We should have leaderships.
Correct.
And some people are good at leading in this, let them take
Absolutely.
the charge. And some people are good at leading in that thing, let them take the charge.
Correct.
I feel threatened, just because someone maybe is bringing home the money, that doesn't make a leader, because someone else is also raising the kids,
Correct.
So leadership should be a joint thing. So how do you implement that sort of thinking in regards to people who think they have misunderstood our old texts? And I think they think that, no, you should just listen to what you're told.
Yes.
You should just listen to what the grown-ups are saying. How do you sort of overcome that aspect?
Correct. So like we were talking about yesterday, in our conversation, that in our epics and in our ancient texts, there has always been the liberty to speak up. Correct? Now, the question is, should we be challenging an elder person? Isn't it?
Yes.
My question is, should we be challenging someone who's not doing it right? Rather, take the elder or the younger out.
Yes.
It's not about elder, younger, or equals.
Absolutely.
It's about should we be challenging something that's not right? Should we be challenging something that's not healthy for the ecosystem? Should we be challenging something that is having a wrong impact on the family or the world at large? Should we be challenging something that is not for the well-being of the person whom we are challenging?
Absolutely.
And in every question that I've asked, the answer most thoughtful people will give is, yes, we should. Correct. Now, once the question is, should we be challenging a person who is ABC? Should we be challenging a person who's not doing it right, ABC, all of these things? Then replace that question with, should we be challenging an elder who is not doing it right? Should we be challenging an elder who's not having that impact? Should we be challenging an elder who's not concerned about his well-being and doing things in a rigid, non-flexible way? And the answer would be yes. It's not a question of elder, younger, or equal. We will definitely do it with great sensitivity. We will definitely do it with great respect, but it must be done regardless of who the person is. Wrong is wrong if everybody is doing it. Right is right, even if nobody is doing it.
Yeah.
Right? You
Correct.
can't change right and wrong just because someone's doing or someone's not doing, correct? So in which case, we have, like we were talking about yesterday, Shri Krishna challenging Bhishma, making Arjun challenging Bhishma,
Yes.
making Arjun challenging Drona, making Arjun challenging Kripacharya in the Mahabharata, correct?
Yes.
Bhishma, should he have kept quiet? No. Should it be challenged? Yes. Did Krishna have Arjun challenge? Yes. Correct. So we have in our own ancient histories, if somebody in this country says that, hey, look, our culture doesn't allow us to do that. Look at this.
Yes.
Look
Yes.
at this, right? You have in the Ramayana, we are talking about, a culture of Indians would usually talk about women as someone who are meant to be subservient,
Yes.
women who are someone who are meant to be docile, women who are not meant to raise their voice, those pativrata naris, you know. No, women empowerment, you don't need to empower a woman. A woman is already empowered.
Agreed.
That term is a misnomer in
Yeah.
one sense. Well, what we're doing is we by saying women empowerment, we are telling, okay, I give you the right to
Right.
empower me.
Yes. Yes.
Who under the sun are you to empower me?
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
I already have the spirit in me. That empowerment is that. The grace of the Almighty also runs in me as much as it runs in a man. You
Yes.
know, you see what I mean? So in the Ramayana, you find all those ladies who are listening to us here, if your husbands are in any way, shape, or form abusive in whatever, emotional, physical, whatever way, our culture is not a culture where you're meant to keep quiet and just tolerate abuse. That is the stupidest, idiotic thing that spiritual leaders can ever teach. That tolerate and forgive.
Uh,
Tolerance and forgiveness is important, but it has an asterisk which says conditions apply. You know, you know what I mean? So here we have Sita. When Ram says, "I'm not going to take you along with me to the forest," Sita gives it back, not out of arrogance, not out of haughtiness, not out of being holier than thou, but out of being assertive.
yeah.
One has to be assertive, not arrogant.
And
You know,
knowing who she is, knowing.
knowing who she is, absolutely. And she says, well, I'm sorry to say, but I'm not sure if my you telling me that there are beasts in the forest, animals in the forest. She said, where else are they meant to live? And she said, I think my father probably married me to not a man. Doesn't look like he's a man here. These are the words spoken by Sita. She speaks to her mother-in-law Kausalya in a very assertive, respectful way.
Yes.
Correct. So here is this principle in our own culture, because you brought up about India and its setting,
Yes.
that from our epics, from our histories, here we have these principles that we can be assertive, not arrogant.
Yes.
We can be respectful, yet communicate our points with sensitivity. And in terms of the other generation, on the other side, we can say, okay, I'll learn how to be assertive. I'll learn how to say, okay, challenge my elders and say, okay, this is something that we could have done better, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But how would they open themselves up to this? Isn't it? Which is why I think communication is a very important principle. We have to sit down on the table and talk. If we do not talk, if we do not discuss, the same old rigid patterns repeat themselves, correct? And when we communicate, we have to communicate in a way that we solicit a yes, correct? So which basically means, how do we look at a win-win?
Mm.
How do we look at a win-win? How do we say that, okay, your interests are taken care of and our interests are taken care of? In fact, it's not your or mine, it's our interests
Ours.
are taken care of as
Yes.
a family. So when we talk to elders, or for that matter to anybody, three things need to be remembered at all times in our communication. Number one, is, do we have the right motive? And the right motive is not to be holier than thou.
Yes.
The right motive is not to be, aggressive, assertive, but not aggressive. The right motive is to benefit the larger family and not just, okay, I believe, so I want it done.
Yeah.
It's not I
Yeah.
believe, it's we should believe, correct?
Yes.
So we should have the right motive. Number two, we should know the right way to do it. Often it's not what is said, but how it is said that makes a lot of difference. And especially with elders, how it is said is so very important, simply because they have age in their favor. They have a little more experience, quote unquote, from the world that they've lived in their favor. And obviously that kind of a superiority demands respect. So how do we present it is very crucial. That will open their minds up rather than closing them up. And number three is it the right timing? When do we speak it? You
Wow.
know, when do we speak it? If there's something that's going wrong in the house and suddenly we bring it up saying, look, this is how you've done it this way. Look what the outcome is. What if we just gave it 2 weeks to pass and then sat down and communicated and said, hey, wait a minute. 2 weeks back we this happened. I'm not. How could we have done different? How could we have done it differently to
Mm.
avoid that? You know. So taking inputs from them, sharing our inputs. It's a dialogue. Sanskrit is called samvad. You know. And in that dialogue, I think there is a possibility to open hearts, open minds. And then, of course, when we serve them and we make emotional investments in relationships with them, that side also opens their hearts up. You know. So I think these are a couple of points I would say. We should have the courage to challenge,
This
and
is,
they should also have the openness to be
yeah,
challenged.
I loved what you said because I am all about being very honoring who I am, honoring everybody for who they are. So
Yes.
I always live by that. I don't expect other people to change so that I feel better, and
Yes.
that same way I honor who I am and have that relationship, authentically with people. But
Correct.
what I learned from this moment is to actually choose the timing,
Yes.
like choosing, being patient to when
Correct.
to say it, how to say it. That
Yes.
has really, really touched with me because I'm like,
Sure.
okay, that opens me up, that opens up to what I want to actually do. It
Yes.
will help me even more with what I want to do with parenting. I think
Yeah.
before I was probably thinking I will just be who I am, share what I am. But yes, I have to think about how can I open up the other side even more. And
Correct.
that's
Correct.
brilliant because I think that way this system can work in India because that young
Yes.
generation can actually feel free to be who they are, but they'll also learn how to open their parents up, how to open their
Yes.
elders up to receive instead
Correct.
of blocking them. So that was
Absolutely.
brilliant. That was brilliant.
Thank you.
And what do you feel about like the dynamics in the family? So for me, I don't encourage any sort of one person dictating in the house. I feel like,
Mhm.
if we teach within our homes to have a community of leadership, like I mentioned before, where,
Yes.
you know, uh, you are good at this, you take that charge, encourage your children to
Correct.
take leaders. Because my whole thing about Indians are very smart people.
Yes.
Every household literally has a smart child. But I
Yes.
always feel like they fall into the following category. So they are
Mhm.
so blocked in by just doing everything what they've been told to do that they actually don't sometimes break out of that box. They don't actually become
Correct.
empowered leaders. So my
Correct.
whole thing is to actually how to create beautiful, authentic, powerful leaders in our next generation
Yes.
that have compassion, that actually have the strength to stand for something that's not right.
Correct.
Not just being using leadership from power and money and status. I'm not
Yes.
saying. I'm
Of
talking about
course.
true leadership where they can actually use that to help and promote goodness, all around us.
Yes. Yes. Indeed. Yeah.
So,
I think. Yeah. Yeah.
no, so I was
So,
saying, how do you feel like the hierarchy system in our families? So
mhm.
I feel like they um, squash that development. I feel like they fall into the whole, there's one boss, we all do what that person wants us to do. And it sort of doesn't allow for that growth to happen. So I was just asking your thoughts on that.
Yes. I think we can't do away with hierarchy completely. Correct.
Mhm.
Because in every area of life, there has to be somebody who takes responsibility.
Yeah.
because that's their speciality, their USP, their strength, their forte.
But can I
Correct?
ask something? Within
Sure.
that family, isn't like what I'm trying to get to is, yes, absolutely right. But if you see, I feel like because a man brings maybe the financial
Okay.
support, he
Okay.
also
Okay. That sense.
automatically gets a space that this is number one. But I'm
Okay.
saying
Okay.
even for
Now I
the
get it. Yeah.
woman who is raising the kid.
Sure. 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 Sure.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
that,
Oh, that's the space you're asking from.
yeah,
Okay. 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 Yeah. I think so. I think which really means that we start looking at every role and responsibility as equally important in the ecosystem of the family.
yes,
Correct? It's not that one person doing something is more important than the other.
yes.
Correct? Like you've heard that, I don't know if you've heard the famous story. I love that story. There was a gentleman who came back home after work one day, and the whole house was all over the place. The television was like this, cables were taken off, the cushions were all over the place, the pots were uncleaned in the kitchen sink. Everything was a royal mess at home. And the kids were like, using their crayons to color the walls of the living room. And the man was so annoyed. He said, then he felt maybe his wife is really ill that day.
Yeah.
So he thought, let me go check if my wife is ill. So he went into the bedroom, and his wife was like relaxing on the bed, watching television, watching a movie. He said, what are you doing? Look at the whole house. It's all a big mess here.
Yeah.
She said, every single day you come back home and you ask me, what I don't understand what you do all throughout the day. So I thought today I'll show you what I do all throughout the day. By not doing it,
Yeah.
that's when you realize what the role is.
Mm.
Correct? So it's not one is important and the other is less important.
Mm.
So when we understand that each and every single person plays a very key and an important role in the family, and when we start respecting that roles, we don't start deriving power and strength from our role or what we do.
Mm.
Right? Sometimes it's both ways. Sometimes men can derive a role, or let's not keep it men, whoever the breadwinner is, men or women, right? Whoever the breadwinner is, being gender neutral, whoever's bringing in the money, or whoever's bringing in the larger chunk,
Mm-hmm.
derives power and strength from the fact that, hey, I'm bringing this home. Or then the other person who's the homemaker or who's taking care of the home or whatever, look, you're bringing in the money, you're not doing a favor. It's your duty. I'm taking care of it all. You can derive power and strength from anything that you do, correct? So when we start understanding that it's not me better than you, it is that we have our unique roles to play. And when we play our unique roles very well, that's when we write a beautiful essay or a poem. In a keyboard on your laptop, there's different keys. It's not that one key is more important than the other. Correct. Each key plays its role. If one key is out of order, you can't type the sentence full. Correct.
Absolutely.
So you need each key in place. You know what I mean? So situational leadership is about allowing the person who's great at something to take that particular role. That's called situational leadership. The most popular story of the hare and the tortoise.
Mm.
We
Yeah.
heard the story of the hare and the tortoise going for a race, and then the tortoise is slow, the hare rests, and the tortoise wins the race. And the lesson of the story is slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah.
Correct? Then the rabbit realizes, hey, this is not good. Challenges the tortoise again for a race. This time the rabbit does not rest, wins the race. And what is the lesson of the story? Fast and consistent can beat the slow and steady.
Mm.
Correct? Now, the story doesn't end there.
Oh.
The story doesn't end there. Correct? Now the hare and the tortoise again challenge. Now the tortoise challenges the rabbit again for a race. Now this time on a slightly different route. Correct? Now what happens is both of them run together, and then the rabbit or the hare and the tortoise both come to a river. The route is decided by the tortoise, and the tortoise jumps into the river and crosses the river and wins the race. The
Yeah.
lesson of the story is identify your core competency and take that route, and you will win the race. Correct? Now the story doesn't end there. Even now, by now, the tortoise and the rabbit had become good friends. So many times they had run the race together. They had made a relationship with each other, and they were not fulfilled challenging each other. They said, can we think of a better way to run the race?
Mm.
Now they kept the same route, the land and the water route.
Mm.
Correct? And both of them went together. Correct? And then the tortoise took the rabbit on the shoulders,
Yeah.
and both of them crossed the river together. And the fulfillment, the satisfaction they had as a team was way more than what they did earlier. Now, this is situational leadership. On the ground, let the rabbit take the charge. In the water, let the tortoise take the charge. And that's how families should function and leadership role should be
I
assigned.
love this story. This is brilliant. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. That was
Thank you.
fun. And it's such a good way to even explain to kids, you know.
Yes, yes.
And we can use certain situations to actually, even as parents, allow kids to lead.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
find, like, you know, we do that with our kids a lot, is like when I feel, or I ask for their opinion. I ask for their
Correct.
suggestion. I'm trying to,
Sure.
you know, bring that out in them, help them
Correct.
be decision makers. So you can use a
Sure.
lot of opportunities within your home.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Create, you know, characteristics in your kids that would actually help them in the long run. You know, we just
True.
have to notice those moments in life when life
Yes.
actually gives us those opportunities. So
Yeah.
definitely a great thing. Now, what do you think is a critical age for parents to give independence to their kids? What age?
To be very honest, it's less about age and more about a sense of character, integrity, and conscience. Correct.
Yes.
You can have someone who's a grown up but doesn't have that sense of conscience. Giving independence could be fatal. You could have someone very young,
Yeah.
but has a very strong sense of conscience, self-belief, you know. And when you have someone like that, you give someone independence like that, you'll find the kids use that independence rightly. See, when independence is a tool we are handing to our kids, correct? They have to have the character to use that tool rightly. Okay. It's not about what we give them. It's about, do they have the capacity, the ability to handle and utilize what we give them. Correct.
Yes.
So it's not about what age and when and how. It's about how are we raising them? Are we raising them with a very strong sense of inner conscience? Are we raising them with a very strong sense of personal accountability and accountability to their closed ones? Are we raising them with a sense of responsibility of using their whatever they receive in a very responsible way? If that's how their upbringing is, if they've handled their toys responsibly, if they've handled their bedding responsibly, if they've handled their gadgets responsibly, when you give them independence, they have that attitude to handle their independence responsibly as well. So I don't see how attitudes are agnostic. They don't discriminate between a toy and the quality of independence. So if you have the quality of handling a toy properly, you will handle independence rightly as well. But having said that, spoken on that principle, there are certain aspects. Obviously, we as a generation know that at certain ages we wouldn't expose our kids to certain things within the boundaries of what we know. We all are aware, and that obviously that goes without saying, obviously. But within those boundaries, I feel it's a matter of how we raise them with a sense of responsibility and conscience. Then independence, how is it disastrous? Independence is disastrous when the person who has it, he or she, doesn't have, the responsibility, the accountability, and the integrity to use it properly. Correct? So I would say that's how we would look at it.
Yes, absolutely. This is another great point, because I absolutely agree with you that age has got nothing to do with it.
Yes.
And I feel as parents that the more you make your child independent of you, the better it is for them. So I've noticed one thing over here, there's a lot of attachment issues between especially a mother and their child. And then when I look at Australia, it's a very different kind of way. It's more like, okay, go out and see what the world's like.
Yes.
And so I tried to come to a middle ground with, like, yes, I'm attached to my children, but I also
Yes,
don't want to stop them flying. So
correct.
as we speak, my two daughters are in Australia living alone,
Hmm.
running a house,
Hmm.
cooking, cleaning, gardening,
Correct.
everything, laundry on their own, no parental help, no grandparents, everything. So
Yes.
I look at that and I think, okay, that's sort of how I wanted them to be raised, because it gives them independence, it gives them
Hmm.
accountability and responsibility, like I said. So
Hmm.
even if I'm here, my mind's at peace, I'm settled.
Correct. Correct.
I find here there's a little bit more attachment. So there's a
Hmm.
little bit more of that, you should need me.
Hmm.
But when I look at the mother nature, when I look at animals,
Hmm.
I feel like even animals show us. So if we look at
Yes.
nature, nature actually gives you a lot of clues of how to live life.
Correct.
And I think because we are such a generation of stimulation and over exposure to like gadgets and this and that, and we're
Yeah.
so busy, we've stopped looking at nature.
Hmm.
Whereas nature is like one of the biggest teachers. It teaches you how to live
Absolutely.
with harmony. So when I look at any mother, any creature that's raising their child, the first thing they do is teach them how to be independent of the parent.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's how to survive without me.
Hmm.
So I find that's a little bit different in this culture. So how do
Hmm.
you see that?
Yes. Yes. I think we're looking at three terms. We're looking at dependence, we're looking at independence,
Mhm.
and we look at interdependence.
Mhm.
Correct?
Yeah.
Dependence turns a person into a slave.
Yeah.
Correct? When somebody is dependent on you all the time, in one sense, not in the wrong sense of the term slave,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
kind of a slave, where, like you rightly said, you gain the control over the person. You are dependent on me for your pocket money. You're dependent on me for ABC. You're dependent on me for everything. So I'm in control. I'm the boss. You're the subordinate.
Yeah.
So slave in that sense, correct? So dependency gives rise to slavery, right?
Mm.
Now, which is one extreme. The other extreme is independence on the other side of the extreme can give rise to recklessness.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So you can, which is why the point we mentioned earlier, without responsibility, without accountability, without integrity, independence can be disastrous. It can cause recklessness, you know? So parenting is about the answer to the last question first, that we really work on bringing them up in that way.
Mm.
That is when independence is fine, correct? There's no worries giving them independence. Right. But if we get, like you were talking, what you said is so true. Mother Nature teaches us so beautiful lessons. We just have to keep our eyes, our ears, and our minds open. And we can learn so much from nature around. Now, Mother Nature, if you see any animal from the animal kingdom, they'll give their children independence, or their offspring, rather, independence, only when they see they're competent to handle those things.
Mm.
Up until then, there's a level of dependence they keep. It's not that Mother Nature makes them independent straight away.
Yeah.
There is a certain level of dependence that is needed to be able to make them competent, make them responsible, make them stand on their own feet, and then they give them that independence. Correct? Now, when they give them that independence, even after having given them that independence, up until a certain point of time when they are grown up to be by themselves, they are there in the vicinity around
Mm.
to just keep an eye, not poking their nose and interfering in every little thing,
Yeah.
but being there by the side to see if there be any untoward situation that may come up. We will be there for them. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Now we, all of us, each one of us, have made our own mistakes, and we have learned from our mistakes. Why would we not allow our children to make their own mistakes and learn from their
Yeah.
mistakes?
Yeah.
Correct? Now, when you impart your experience to them, it is a dogmatic, theoretical philosophy, which has its value, undoubtedly, which has its value. But until they go through something, it's not their own.
Exactly.
It's yours that you have given to them.
And I feel like that lesson will completely never be learned either.
Correct, correct. So I think there is a certain level of dependence that is needed, and there is a certain level of independence that is needed.
Absolutely.
Independence is in giving them that liberty, and dependence is being there as a neutral observer to jump in, to be by their side if any untoward decision be made, any wrong decision be made. So what's happened is they've learned their lesson, they've got an experience. But simultaneously, you've also been there to clean up the mess and explain to them the wisdom based on which they could have avoided it or handled it better. You know,
Very
so
true.
that is where the principle of interdependence comes in. You know, dependence is extremism, that you remain there and I'm going to remain on top, the hierarchy that you were talking about. You know,
Yes.
and independence is another extreme, which is like can go to reckless levels where okay, I'm out of the picture
Yeah.
now as a parent, and you and your life.
Yeah.
You know, that doesn't work. But when we have that balance, which is interdependence, you know, we are both dependent on each other. Correct. The child is dependent on the parent for the wisdom that the parent has, which he or she will not have at that age.
Mm.
Correct. And the parent is dependent on their child, correct, to feel the freshness and the loving bonding that they have with their children. So there is a sense of interdependence, correct.
Yes.
So I think that's how it'll work better when we
Yes.
have that win-win kind of a situation.
Agreed. Absolutely
Yeah.
agreed. Another thing that I find impacts a lot of kids is education. So when I
Hmm.
first shifted from Australia to India, me and Zarava just moved this year.
Hmm.
The first question was, what school is Zarava going to? And I was quite shocked because, coming from Australia, I've moved here, I was more thinking, okay, Zarava's got to be used to the climate, the people, the food, the language. I mean, he's been here many times, and I thought
Yes.
permanently shifting, I'm more worried about the other sides and, his
Hmm.
friends and everything. I was thinking on a broader level. And everybody was concentrating on school, and I just thought, wow, school is such an issue here. So it's
Hmm.
a massive factor. And I have had a very different experience with schooling,
Hmm.
and I have raised my kids very differently in regards to schooling as well. So my dad is actually Bengali, and
Hmm.
he's always a study, study, study. And I literally was a rebel, and I was like, oh, so I challenged my own dad,
Hmm.
and and what had happened was he still talks about it, and he says to me, see, you could have done this, you could have done that. And I said, Dad, I'm doing what I want. You have to still,
Hmm.
and he's 80 and he still hasn't understood that, right?
Hmm.
And I respect his feelings, but like I said, I didn't mold to what he wanted because it was
Correct.
not my soul calling. So
Hmm.
I expressed to my dad, look, this education system is not for me. So
Hmm.
then he sort of tried to latch on to my elder daughter who's 20, and she also didn't. I said to my dad, maybe God's trying to tell you something, and I said, Dad, I'm sorry. I don't think none of us are going down that path. So it's
Uh-huh.
a joke now. But my eldest daughter now is a dog trainer. She rescues dogs, and she
Hmm.
rehabilitates dogs, and she looks after dogs, and she loves it. It's her passion.
Hmm.
But for me, like with you, I completely agree that if you have that integrity, if you have that love, that purpose for something in your life, that
Correct.
could be your success. And I'm not talking
Yes.
with money. I'm talking
Yes.
because I look at kids who are like having anxiety, they have depression. They are
Yes.
they're on drugs. They are having illicit drugs or prescription drugs. They're
Absolutely.
mentally not happy. They're living lives that are not fulfilled, right? I
Hmm.
don't believe just having a job and you living that way is success.
Hmm.
So I'm trying to also shift that mindset here where,
Correct.
people have to understand that um, I think the market is saturated with engineers and doctors and IT professionals. But I said, like, we went next door to see a presentation on a DLF building, and
Hmm.
it was amazing, and they brought in some guy from overseas to do the landscaping, and I thought,
Hmm.
why don't we have an amazing Indian landscaper? Why do we have to
Mm-hmm.
bring in someone from overseas?
Course. Course.
Right, it's because that person who was doing gardening was not valued when he was
Correct.
5.
Absolutely.
Right, so his purpose
Absolutely.
was destroyed, his passion was destroyed. So
Correct.
so much creativity, so much of that sort of growth it gets destroyed because we think that someone being a doctorate or someone having some sort of title
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
success. But then we're killing off so many dreams, and we're killing off. So
Correct.
education for me is quite different. I feel like if
Yes.
we can find the gift our child has,
Yes.
support that, create an environment that supports that, then we
Great.
can create amazing,
Sure.
successful, like help them. We're not creating them, we're actually helping them to uncover who they are. That's
Yeah.
what I think education should be about.
Yeah. 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 I think you're spot on again there. Complete resonance with what you're saying. And like you said, your journey, my journey has been similar. Rebels. You rebelled in your own way. I couldn't do it just because they wanted, it's how I could be true to myself. And in the process, I did kind of cause a little bit of emotional hurt to them,
Same.
but they understood over a period of time. Now, when we're talking about education, we have to look at the word education, the etymology of the word. You know, the very word education comes from the Latin educare. And educare in Latin means to bring out what is innately within you.
Mm,
And look at how far the word education has gone with from what it originally means.
yeah.
Correct? So, what's innately yours, what's innately integrated with your soul,
Mm,
needs to be brought out. That's educare.
wow.
Correct? So, the whole process of education is meant to bring out who you are, isn't
Yes.
it? Now, in the process of doing so, obviously, what education has come down to be today is academic education,
Yes.
you know, which is an important part of life. I definitely believe that it's an important part of life because we need to live in the real world, correct? And when we live in the real world, there are real needs, and we need to know things, correct? So that's an important part of our education, but that is not education by itself.
Yes. Absolutely.
Academic education is a tiny part of the entire process called education.
Mm,
Now, what's happened is the process of education is forgotten, and academic education is called education. You
yeah.
know, so that very famous quote by Albert Einstein. If you have a fish, a rabbit, an elephant, a horse, a deer, and a monkey, and put them all in a line, and say, okay, so you have your test today, and the test is each of you has to climb a tree. The fish is going to live its entire life thinking it's a good, useless, stupid, good for nothing.
Absolutely.
How can you measure a fish, a
Absolutely.
monkey, and an elephant by the same standard of evaluation?
Yes.
Correct? So
Yeah.
now every child is different. Every child is differently endowed, differently gifted.
Mm,
Correct? They're unique, isn't it? So if they're unique, there is a great need to measure every child's progress based on his or her endowment,
yes.
and not
Absolutely.
on one standard. Okay, if I don't have the ability to be great at math, am I stupid? No.
You might be a
Am I,
great artist.
I might be a great landscapist.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Gardening at 5, and I was looked down upon because I like gardening.
Yeah.
Why? You
Absolutely.
know, why? I had this calling. I was zero in sports. Shikhar won't like it. But for me, sports, like, it just didn't come naturally to me, correct?
Yeah.
Imagine as a young boy, my
And
parents had to
imagine
push me out of the home.
imagine the education system was that sports was regarded.
Sports was the
uh,
standard. I
and
would be a failure. I would be a failure. Can you imagine that? Now my parents had to push me out of our home, to go play with kids, my friends around. Now, which kid needs to be pushed to play? But
yeah.
here, like a weird kind of a guy. I needed to be pushed out of our home to go out and play. But when it came to reading books, when
No,
it came to music, when it came to vocals, when
yeah.
it came to writing, well, came easy. You
Wow.
know, came easy. Now, which is where my parents didn't object to anything that I did, obviously, but I had to take that responsibility and that onus on myself
Yes.
to say, okay, I'm not going to fit in.
Mm,
I'm going to pursue what I feel is my calling, my purpose, and I feel is, something that I can really do and contribute something to the world. You know. Now, what if the parents facilitate that? What if the
yeah.
education system
Yeah.
facilitates that? So
Absolutely.
that we don't have exceptional guys like me or like you or like somebody else who had to kind of, in one sense, rebel
Yeah.
to follow their calling.
Absolutely.
What if following your calling, your passion, what you're great
Natural.
at,
It was
is
natural.
natural and
Yeah.
integrated with the ecosystem?
Yes.
That is education,
So
you
what I
know?
have done, I did a this thing is that if
Hmm.
you find, and they were asking me, how do you find your child's gift? I'm like, watch them,
Hmm. Yeah,
watch
of
them.
course, of course,
All you got to do is watch them. Or
of
then if
course.
I actually used the example of gardening. I said, if I saw that Zarava was into gardening, I'd buy pot plants, I'd buy potting mix, I'd buy
Sure,
seedlings, I would
sure.
create a little garden, a herb garden at home. I also said, you can teach your child business through this passion. I said, you then
Of
go
course, of
go and
course.
ask neighbors that you can water their, plants every week, and you get 5 rupees a week for watering
Yeah,
every day their plant. You can actually
yeah.
create a different thinking, a different ecosystem just from their passion and pride.
Correct.
And I said, then go to the school and ask, okay, this is my child's gift.
Hmm.
How can you support it? I said, it takes this much effort.
Yes,
It's just this much effort and awareness,
yes,
and you
yes,
can truly work with your child's gift. And you don't know, and
yes,
people have to realize these days the world is not just India anymore. They will fly
yes.
you somewhere, they will take you to a different country if you're good at what you do.
Of course,
They will
of
look
course.
at your life. You can't even imagine that you would be a monk and you'd be flown
Yeah,
all over the world
yeah.
speaking to people, right?
That's true. Very true.
Right. And who, if you had put down on a piece of paper, what do you think that this would entail later on? You would not have put this down,
Absolutely, absolutely,
right? You would have thought you're just
absolutely.
stay in a monastery, you're going to live life very simple there, and you're going to do.
Spot on. Correct.
Look what it's done for you. And this is what I want the mindset of people to change, and parents especially, that if your daughter is showing that she's great at cooking, please encourage that. Make
Absolutely,
a system, a
absolutely.
network, anything that supports that, because
Correct,
you don't
correct.
know when someone is vibrating on that frequency, when they're loving what they're doing, that
Yes.
frequency will take them to another level.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I
That's
totally agree. Totally agree. You know what happens is, in this particular principle that you're mentioning, that you gave the example of Zoravar, right? That, okay, if he likes gardening, so you allow him to, you buy pots for plants for him, you teach him how to garden, herb garden, and
yeah.
then you kind of create a sense of business. So he feels that, okay, this can also be a career. Correct. Now,
Yes.
what happens in a country like India in particular is there are certain aspects of work or
Mm,
certain streams that weren't always seen as, hey, this can't be mainstream.
yeah.
Correct? Hey, look, this is not how you would be. This won't be respected. This
Mm,
won't be something that is respectable.
mm.
But it's eventually changing. Things are changing a lot, where everything has a dignity. Work has dignity. It doesn't matter what particular thing you're doing. Correct.
Yeah.
And if that's your passion, you can grow in it, and you one day you will be so respectable that your parents will be proud
Yes.
of what you're doing. Correct. Now, so I think that is very, very crucial. Correct. That to people, it's changing slowly. It's
Yes.
changing. Now, secondly, along with allowing our children to follow their passion, I think there is a need that we do not have them neglect the academic side.
No, absolutely not.
That's just a tiny part. Only thing is that we don't brand judge them based on that.
Yes. And
That's important.
we don't
Yes,
find them, but
yes,
the
yes.
results they get through that academic.
Correct. We
You
don't
know,
evaluate them and their progress based on that, but that's a part of their life. And if they're
absolutely.
great at that, good. If they're not great, fine. You do what you can do and learn it. Correct.
Yes,
And the
absolutely.
third aspect, which is very crucial in this, which I have always spoken when this topic comes up, is I as much as I believe in this principle, and I'm a strong proponent of this, at the same time, I always balance it out by looking at what real life is. You know, following one's passion is, I'll be honest here, is is the privilege of the wealthy, the rich, and people who have resources and facilities, because they don't have mortgages, they don't have a terminally ill parent at home, they don't have financial liabilities, so they can take risks, they can take chances. What if it doesn't work to be a career? Fine, I still can manage with whatever is there at my beck and call because I have things around me. I know families where they have one son or one daughter, right? The father's been a patient of a terminal disease for like several years, is degenerating slowly. The mother's the only breadwinner at home, and the mother's not an educated lady. So she's going, doing some household chores, some smaller things, and bringing in money home. And through that money, caring for the husband and trying to see if the son can be educated, right? Now, the son obviously has a certain passion to follow, correct? But now here's a practical real life situation which demands that, hey, wait a minute, the mother's struggling hard to keep everything together. It automatically brings in a certain sense of personal responsibility on part of the child, who's growing up, not out of force, not out of pushing him or her, but out of a genuine sense of love and gratitude that I need to do something which ensures financial stability first. So, what I say is, if that be the case, if that be the case, there is a need to look at your academic education or whatever else to make sure that there is some financial returns that come back, home from your job or whatever else you do. But I've always told such people that even when you're doing that, do not give up on your passion. Pursue your passion, even if it's a little tiny bit, side by side. Today, your situation is such that you're not able to put that in the forefront. Correct. Today, your responsibility takes the front seat and your passion the back seat, but you should still follow it.
Yes.
Your situations change, tables turn over, life situation change. There will be a situation when the responsibility side goes down and your passion will come to the front seat. So this practical dimension also needs to be heard by one and all, because otherwise, what happens is there are some people who push this passion side so much that I know youngsters down there in real situations who are rebelling, you know, who are rebelling against parents who have been so genuine, who have, toiled and given their blood, sweat, and tears to bring those children up. And now, when it's their turn to kind of do something to stabilize the situation in the name of passion, they're taking risks which are uncalculated.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a great point, because even in my journey, I became a mum at 21. If I wanted to pursue what I'm doing today, I wouldn't have raised those kids appropriately.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I had to be patient with my passion.
Yes, you have to be.
I did not have that passion and have that fire in me. I just
Correct.
knew that the timing wasn't right.
Correct.
But like you
Correct.
said, I kept the thread.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
I kept my fire alive. I just knew the timing would come.
Correct.
And that is exactly right, because people are like with you too. I asked you the other day, when did this all sort of erupt and happen for you? And you said you've been doing this for over 20 years, but the last 3 years.
That's right.
So people have to have that understanding too. Like even the kids that are rebelling and wanting to go for their passion, you have earned this spot.
Yes.
Your passion didn't die off. You just waited for timing. You had patience as well as passion.
Absolutely.
Same with me. I knew that if I wanted to do this now, I had to actually be accountable for raising my children first.
Correct.
And so I had to raise all 3 of them. And now that Zarav was old enough for me to have a little bit of time away from him, okay, now I can focus on this.
Yes.
But I continued to grow myself with my passion.
Absolutely.
So that when the timing was right, it's like the bamboo shoot, right?
Yes.
It stays underground for so long, timing
shoots up.
It shoots up.
Correct.
And I think that's the right way to do something is definitely understand timing. The universe has its own timing. As long as you keep feeding that passion, exactly like that's a very, very valid point, and but again, everything comes down to actually having a balance between both, not killing off your passion, because that makes really sad people, they around very sad. And we don't want sad people walking around. We want, happy people. We want empowered.
Absolutely.
So it's like you live, you have to sometimes put certain things aside, but you don't forget them.
Correct.
And, kids need to know that, parents need to know that there are ways to actually support your kids. Even though, yes, academics is important, you can still actually support your kids. You can still educate in their, what they want. And both are then happy, because you have to have a realistic understanding too.
Absolutely.
Your child is good at sport and is not as good as math, and you have to actually you have to have an understanding and an acceptance of that.
Correct.
And that is the first part of, that's what gives you peace as well. So whatever
Yes.
numbers they're bringing home, it's in relation to where they are.
Yes.
It's in relation to their capacity, and you have to understand that. And we as parents should never live through our kids, right?
Yes.
So we have to get, as a mother, I've learned one thing, and I fell into this trap myself, especially with, I think it was more with Zarava. I sort of got into the trap of, I was living in Australia with the three of them, and it was very overwhelming at times. And the only way I saw my worth was just be their mum. So, everything was about me being their mum, and that's how I felt good about myself. And then I realized, wow, I'm losing a sense of self, and I'm also just using them for me to feel good about myself. And that was awareness that I had to sort of deal with and sort of hold on. Oh, this is too much load on them I'll be putting later on. That you make me feel good.
Correct.
That I need you to feel worthy. And so I also had to go through that transition and go, no, hold on. Let me go again and find myself again.
Self-worth. Correct.
Right. So this is a very important thing for parents too.
Absolutely.
That please have your own individual worth. And I'm not even talking about the jobs and stuff. Just being who you are is good enough.
Yes.
And that's a massive thing I want to teach, especially mums, is that, your worth doesn't come from you just being a mum. You're an individual. You're your own soul. And you are just perfect however you are. So I had to learn that because I fell into that trap. So that's another thing that I really encourage parenting is actually,
absolutely.
Amazing.
I think what you're saying is so true, because all what we do in our life is just a role. Being a mom is a role, being a dad is a role, being a housewife is a role, being a spouse is a role, being a daughter or a son is a role. These are all roles we play, correct? But roles don't give us our worth.
Yes.
Our worth is our own self-worth, correct? And I often tell young couples, especially moms, I tell them that what you're saying is so true, because when you find that sense of worth in yourself, kids will grow up and they'll go and have their own families and their own paths. What will you do then?
Yes.
If you haven't found yourself. If your happiness comes just by that connection has to move on, correct? Just real life. And that's why you have to have a self-connection. And only when you're connected to your own self can you find that. So very, very well said. Very well said.
So I found that actually made me a better parent when I understood that. Because it released my kids from any obligation, to be honest.
True.
And so I came from so tell me one thing. What would be 3 things that you would share with a parent? And I wanted to be like 3 new parents and then 3 different things for parents who are already parents. So a couple who are going to plan to have kids, what would be the 3 main things you would tell them about parenting? And what would be the 3 main things you would tell parents who have already got kids to sort of empower their family,
Correct. So the first 3 to parents who would now want to have a child and raise a child is know that parenting is a science and an art. Correct. Number 2, you have to learn it. You have to learn it. Like they say, a child gives birth to a parent.
Yes.
It's not that the parent gives rise to just a child.
I think that's more true.
A child gives rise to a parent. You've never been a parent before, so you're born as a parent. If a child is born to you, you are born as well. So understand that you have to learn how to grow up as a parent. When a child is growing up as a child, you have to know you're growing up as a parent as well. It's the first time you're a parent.
Yes.
So understand that. That's the second. And third thing I would say is learn parenting. First is know that it's a science and an art. Second is learn it and grow with it. You're born as well. And number 3, when we're talking about learning it, learn from the right source. Correct. If you have fundamental errors in what parenting is, you messed up. messed up, you know. So these are the three things I would say to parents who are about to now start a family and have a child. The three things to parents who already have a child, right? The first thing I would say is invest your time in understanding their psychophysical makeup. If you don't understand them, you're not going to be able to deal with them. You're not going to be able to serve them well. You're
Yep.
not going to be able to love them well, right? Now, understanding their psychophysical makeup is very crucial because even in the animal kingdom, right, you wouldn't deal with a lion the same way as you deal with a poodle,
Yes.
correct? Why? Their temperaments are different.
Mm.
Their natures are different. So you know that the needs, interests, concerns, temperaments, natures are different. So I need to deal with them in a different way. Now, how can you apply the same thing to everybody? Now, this should not come uh, in a way that is kind of implied. It should be taken up as training. Parents need to be trained to understand the personality of their children,
Mm.
correct? Especially in the modern millennial generation, correct? So there are so many models that exist to understand personality profiles. I'm a strong proponent of the DISC model by Robert Rahm, where you start looking at your kids from their early childhood. You
Yep.
also mentioned to that, you referred to that you observe them. But here's a more systematic way of observing them. You actually profile them properly. So then when you understand their weaknesses, their strengths, the space they come from, their particular personality type, you know what to do to them in a way that they can really nurture very well. So
Spot.
let's not keep it implied that I kind of understand my child.
Mm.
Let us start getting proper professional training in personality profiling. And this is true for all relationships, not just for kids, but in particular here for kids, right? That's number one. Number two is don't be a sucker. I use that word. Don't be a. I'll tell you what sucker means in the context that I'm kind of defining.
Yeah.
Here, this is a term used by Robert Rahm in his book Personality Profile Types.
Yeah.
What it means is our affection, our love for our children sometimes makes us enablers of wrong. We
Spot on.
become enablers of wrong, you know. So
Yeah.
we think, oh, my child likes this. It's not good for him, but he's going to cry, and I can't deprive
Yeah.
him of that. I never got it when I was a child, but I must give it to him now.
Yeah.
What I'm doing is I'm becoming a Dhritarashtra and giving rise to another Duryodhan.
Yeah.
You
Absolutely.
know, giving rise to a Duryodhan who gets a sense of entitlement.
Can I just cut in with that? Someone asked me like this specific thing. My daughter feels really sad when I don't give her something, and she knows if she comes to me, then I'll eventually give it to her. What should I do? And I said, look,
Mhm.
you're doing two things here. You are not wanting to feel uncomfortable as a father, so you're
Yeah,
giving that, and you're also
yeah.
not wanting her to feel uncomfortable, but you're actually not parenting. You just
Yes,
don't want to feel bad.
absolutely not. Absolutely not parenting.
Parenting is when you look at the situation and think what's right for
Agreed.
that child.
Totally agree.
It's got
Yeah.
nothing to do with feelings. It's got nothing to do with what
Yes.
will make you feel uncomfortable, what will make her. If you
Sure.
look at a situation and you do not judge it,
Correct.
then you can actually parent from a really empowered place.
Yes, sure. Absolutely. So
Yeah.
that's the second.
Yeah.
Don't be enablers of wrong. And that term was used by him. I'm not using that
Yeah.
term.
I agree with
It's
him.
in the book.
I agree with him.
And the third aspect of good parenting for those who have children is what we were talking earlier on. You know, allow them the wings to fly
Mm,
when you give them the roots to be grounded. That's interdependence, not independence, not dependence.
absolutely.
They have the wings to fly their space, but the roots to be grounded. Correct? My guru Radhanath Swami,
Mm,
who wrote the book The Journey Home, he was born in America in Chicago, and he writes in this book a very beautiful story, which has left an indelible mark on my heart. And whenever this question about parenting, what are the three things is asked, this one will obviously be the story I tell. When he turned 30,
mhm.
his father, Mr. Slavin, Jerry Slavin, took him on the banks of the Lake Michigan. They lived in Chicago. They took him out there just father and son, sat him down on the bench and said, look, son, you're a teenager now. You're 13. And as a father, it's just my responsibility to tell you that you're entering in a new world with new possibilities, new opportunities, you know, and this world is a world of choices. Correct. You're going to make choices. There are certain things, if you make certain choices, they may be harmful to you. They make certain choices, they may be very good for you. And I must, as a father, inform you about all of these choices. So here are the things that I want to tell you. And then after this whole entire conversation, he told him, and he said, even if you end up making a wrong choice, even if you end up making a wrong choice, know for sure that we will love you the same always. We will accept you the same always. And most importantly, know for sure, son, that we will be there by your side to sort out any mess that may be created because of a wrong decision you make. Now, this kind of an empowered communication and this kind of a genuine availability for him, for the child gets a sense, the child feels trusted, number one.
Yeah.
The child feels loved. The child feels accepted, correct? And when the child feels loved, trusted, and accepted, there is a huge possibility that the child may not make wrong choices, correct? Now, even if the child does, and there's a mess in his or her life, the child knows whom to turn to.
Yeah.
Rather than turning to some kind of substance abuse, rather than turning to, going into that wallowing in feelings of self-pity, rather than going to extreme steps of ending one's life, they know that I feel accepted here. So these are the three things I want to share. First, understand their personality well, and that needs good training in the world today. Number two is do not be enabler of wrong just because you think, oh, I can't hurt them. And, I didn't get and I don't want to deprive them. That is only going to make them entitled in the future. They should listen to a no because the
Yeah.
world is going to say no to them eventually. And number three is to be there for them, accepting them in totality, and allowing them that wings to fly. And when they have the wings to fly, they may crash land sometimes when they're just learning to fly. So being there for them to nurse their wounds, I think that's what I would tell parents who have children already.
I love that. It's beautiful. And I completely agree with that because have you heard of Dr. Gabor Mate?
No, I haven't actually.
He actually speaks about two things, talks about parenting, and he says, kids are actually born with two innate needs, right? Which is being accepted and to want to be authentic.
Correct.
And most of the times what happens, in order to always be accepted, we give up authenticity.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, and then that becomes a problem later on in our life.
Correct.
As a parent, if we all understand this, and like you said, with your guru's book, that a parent should just be the space for him or her to live life. And once a child has that safety net, that acceptance, they literally, they do not go outside of that. They don't need a drug. They don't need a friend. They don't need some other. They just know this is safety. This is acceptance. This is love.
Absolutely.
And that is the best thing and the best way you can actually raise kids. Completely agree. The other thing is also, as parents, you are allowed to make mistakes.
Yes.
I
very
have
crucial
made mistakes, and I have owned them to my children, and they have been the space for me to be a parent that makes mistakes too.
Correct.
So when we teach each other, we love each other in that mistake, we're only growing each other even more. We're having compassion. That's how they will learn to have compassion for others outside of the family. So never as a parent portray yourself to be perfect. I would suggest that. Always show your vulnerabilities, share show them you're human and you can make mistakes.
Yes.
And it teaches them to also accept themselves as being real. Not about being perfect, it's about being real. So that's another thing I want to add to that. And truly grateful for this interaction.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to have this conversation.
I've truly loved it just listening to you, and feel so glad that so many other people heard this, because it's so important for parents and children to learn. And we touched on our scriptures, and even our scriptures teach all this. So, it's time that we actually bring them back. We've gone so far ahead with technology and information and everything. I feel like we have to come back a little bit now and really relearn those scriptures and wisdom, and start again, because it's beautiful. So
I think all we need to do is there in the scriptural part. When we take the religious connotation aside, and just life wisdom,
Absolutely.
then it's perfect.
Absolutely. And can you please share some details of where people can find more of you? I know it'll be only 2 people that don't know about you, but can you just please tell everybody where they can find you and where they can look you up? The 2 people who don't know who he is.
Oh, good heavens. Yeah, they can look up. We are available on all social media platforms. We are on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Twitter. We are all over the place on social media. There's a book called Life's Amazing Secrets that I also have written and penned down. That's available on Amazon as well, if somebody is interested in picking that up and reading. So I've done my bit by putting it all out there. And if people are interested, they can look it up.
People love you. Thank you so much. And find me on Instagram, Facebook. I'm Just a Mum, and www.imjustamum.in on my website. I've just launched this parenting, what can I call it? This awakening of parenting and how important parenting it is, and I want all mothers to actually really value and understand the responsibility and the capacity you will have. I want you to walk tall with it, and I want you to understand that, we create the next generation to actually truly understand what that means. And for me, it's such a shining light in my life, and I found my purpose through it. So it's a massive part of who I am. So thank you, everyone. And
incredible work. Congratulations. I love the iJAM. Great work.
Thank you. I've also had 20 years of experience. And I tell you, when I asked my daughter, I'm like, oh, what have you noticed about my parenting? She goes, Mum, oh, you were very aggressive at the start. So I've had my own journey, and, it's been amazing. And so it's been wonderful. But thank you, Gaur Gopal.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
So much. And it was so much fun as well. So thank you.
Absolutely. My honor.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.